So welcome to the webinar, Training for Your First Full or Half Ironman Distance Triathlon with David Glover and Krista Schultz. Just a couple quick introductions on us. So I'm David. I'd like to introduce Krista Schultz. Krista Schultz has been a triathlete since 2001. She's raced in a number of half and full Ironman distance events, including a second place age group finish at the inaugural and only Ironman China. And she's also qualified and raced at Ironman World Championships in Hawaii. She's multi-time USAT All-American and represented the state of Maryland for 3 years in the Best of the U.S. competition. Krista graduated from the University of New Orleans with a bachelor's in exercise physiology, and she has her master's in athletic administration from Goucher College. She's worked with endurance athletes for more than a decade, as well as working with all kinds of other folks, including professional athletes from the Baltimore Orioles, Baltimore Ravens, and New Orleans Brass teams. She's certified by USA Triathlon, USA Cycling, and has both her certified strength and conditioning specialist and certified personal trainer certifications from NSCA. Most recently, she's founded She Does Try in 2008 with the goal to help women build confidence through the sport of triathlon.
Thanks, David. Just a quick introduction on David. As you can see from the presentation, there's a picture of the Vineman Hall of Fame. He was inducted into the Hall of Fame. And Vineman's Ironman Distance Triathlon he's won. And he's also won some other Ironman distances. He's completed 28 of those. Also raced as a professional triathlete. He is a cancer survivor, has a book titled Full Time and Sub 9 about his fight through cancer and journey through triathlon. And he's also a U.S. Naval Academy graduate, holds two master's degrees, one in engineering management and one in exercise physiology. He's a founder of Luray Triathlons and certified in USA Cycling, USA Triathlon, and a certified strength and conditioning specialist.
Thank you, Krista. So again, what we're here to talk about is really to pass on some lessons learned and some observations, and both good and bad, things we've done well and things that we haven't done so well, as well as our athletes we've worked with. And at the end of the day, we want to help you be successful in your half or full Ironman distance triathlon. So when I talk about this topic, I always like to start with what I call the 5 deadly sins. And in this list, it evolves, but basically, there's 5 things that we consistently see triathletes doing that we think may be detrimental. So we're going to talk we're going to kind of run through these real quick and go through what we think is a better approach, and then we'll dive into the presentation. And we're going to touch on a bunch of these throughout the presentation. So the first is overcommitment. So trying to do too much all at once. And for me, 2007, I did 3 Ironmans in 2 months. So that was too much. So that's sort of an extreme example. Too much too soon. By that I mean starting to ramp up your training right now. So I talked to a friend in a coffee shop about 2 weeks ago, and asked him, you looked like you just got done for a run. I said, how far did you run? He's like, about 2.5 hours. I'm like, wow, you must be training for a spring marathon. He's like, no, I'm training for Ironman Boulder in August. And I was like, wow, it's a lot of training this far out. Just don't recommend it. 3, not enough recovery. Pretty self-explanatory. So not giving yourself enough rest. Inconsistency. Again, just not being consistent week in, week out, day in, day out. And I actually just wrote an article for the Training Peaks published today on this topic, and I'll share that with you all in the follow-up. And then finally, rigidness. And this is sort of the opposite of inconsistency, and this is being adhering to the schedule to a T. And it's good to have a schedule and a plan, but to an extreme, either way is not always good. So how we want to approach training, so realistic commitment, so what can you realistically do based on your other commitments in life, your job, your career, your family. Purposeful training, so having sort of a long-term perspective on what you need to do to get to race day. Rest is needed, and this is going to depend on you, the type of racing you're doing. Obviously, the more training you're doing, the more rest you may need. So something to consider. Inconsistency. The counters for that is have a plan and follow it. And then finally, rigidness is be flexible. So even though you have a plan, you may have to be flexible.
Yeah, and just to get a little more specific, realistic commitment, if it's not realistic, if you cannot complete either the workouts or just other things you have in your life. So not being able to complete things or being inconsistent because of that, unrealistic commitment. And too much too soon, obviously, overdoing it to the point where you get injured or you're too tired, you're not recovering, obviously you don't feel energetic or you can't execute the next workout. So inconsistency kind of plays into that too, where it's, you're not being realistic or you don't have a plan, like David said. So coming to the last one there where it says be flexible, I think this is a huge problem with a lot of, committed athletes and our personality types. So, remember, not everybody is the same, and we do need to consider our individual recovery needs. So definitely be flexible.
Yep. So the areas we're going to touch on tonight, we're going to talk a little bit about planning. Then we're going to dive into a little bit about the training. So give you some concrete examples of what we think are better workouts, and as well as some things to think about. So training is not just swim, bike, and run. And we'll talk a little bit about race week. So especially how these races tend to be a little bit different from sprint and Olympic distance races. And then finally talk about race day. So what race day is going to be like, as well as some tips and strategies for navigating so that you can be successful at the finish line. So planning. Failing to plan is planning to fail. So, and we just did a webinar a couple weeks ago on planning your triathlon season, so we're not going to spend too much time on it tonight, but I will send that link out. But really this is about, setting your goals and developing or finding a plan. So setting your goals, for your first race, it may just be to finish, to get to the finish line. Maybe you're doing a half this year with the goal to do a full Ironman next year. As you get more competitive, maybe it's age group finish, qualify for Hawaii. So whatever it is, it's important to kind of have that clear picture of where you want to go. And your plan, you think about it as those are your stepping stones. And so in this picture, these stones are what I need to cross to get across the lake. So what are those things I need to do from week to week and day to day to get there? In regards to having training plans, we do have some available if you want to check those out. And finding a plan, maybe working with a coach as well, or even doing your own research and coming up with your own plan. So one of the probably the most important things you can do early is hopefully you've had a chance to review the website before signing up for your race. And if you go online, you can probably find an athlete guide, maybe not for this year yet, but at least for last year, and kind of just check out the race. What's the course like? Aid stations. What's available for nutrition, hydration? Look at the location. If this is in Raleigh, off the top of my head, I think it's either in June or July. So what are the conditions like there? It could be hot and humid. Ironman Boulder in August, it could be hot and dry. So what are the conditions like? And then finally, what are some of the rules? Like if you need to wear a wetsuit to get through the swim, what races can you choose that are more likely to be wetsuit legal? Ironman Louisville, the first year, Chris and I actually both did it before we knew each other. It was 84 degrees, so no wetsuits. But there are other races where it's going to be cold enough that you could pretty much expect one. So the course, I just pulled this off of last year's Ironman Boulder athlete guide. Section of the course. Look at the swim, bike, and run. What is it like? Here's the bike profile from Boulder as well. And just looking at it, the elevation doesn't change a whole lot. It goes from about 4,800 feet to about 5,600, so not too extreme. But as you can see, there's a lot of little ups and downs, and some of them are, somewhat look kind of steep, and some are more gradual. So it looks like a pretty rolling course. Total elevation gain about 4,500 feet. So take that into consideration when you're training.
Yeah, it's important to look at your course map and your elevation profiles. And Boulder being at altitude, you want to consider coming from a place where you're at sea level. That there are some things to consider when you're going from sea level to altitude. So the other thing about looking at the course maps is a lot of people are going to say a lot of different things, especially leading up to the event and at the race check-in. So you might hear, oh, the course is really challenging, or the weather or temperature is going to be really bad, or a lot of different things about race day. And you never know where the people are from, how much training they've done. They could be from Florida, really flat areas, coming to a hilly course. You could be from a more mountainous region going to moderate hills. So it's all really based on the individual. So when you hear all this chatter, consider what you already know about the course and about yourself, and try not to fall into that anxiety of, oh my God, this is the hardest race, or this is something that is not appropriate to your level of expertise.
That's a good point, Krista. And after any race, 9 times out of 10, the athletes who've done the race are going to say, yes, this is the hardest race I've ever done. So it is all somewhat subjective. Plan for and practice race day logistics. So this is actually part of training, and it's swimming, biking, and running. You have to do. But it's also important to think about these other things, what to wear, what to eat, what to drink, what do you carry with you. The picture on the left, that was from the Challenge full Ironman distance race in Rothe, Germany. So as you can see, I was using a rear bottle cage holder. So that's something I trained with, I practiced with, I was real comfortable with. I liked it being back there, but also had the option to put bottles on my frame. So whatever you're using, make sure you practice. On the right, that's actually a picture from either the Ironman Boulder or the 70.3 course. Looks like Roctane is the gel. If that's going to be what's at your race, have you practiced with it? Are you comfortable using it? It may be hammer gel, it may be power bars, whatever it is you make sure you train with it. Or if you plan on using your own thing, think through the logistics of how you're going to carry that and access it.
Yeah, this comes back to what we always say, but the biggest mistake we always hear that's made out there is don't try anything new on race day, no matter how tempting it is. Because even if you think you do well with it, in regards to nutrition, you hadn't been using it, so your body is not used to it in the, conditions of racing. And that goes the same for your gear and what you're wearing. So if you haven't practiced with it, you're going to find out it may affect your race in a negative way, and that happens in most cases.
So now kind of diving a little bit into training. So, and at the end of the day, it is about putting in the time. So you have to swim, you have to bike, you have to run. Unless you're doing an aqua bike, then you can forego the running. But two other important components that we think are very valuable are strength training, both for building power and speed, as well as for injury prevention, and plus rest. Incorporating rest as part of your training routine. And typically, for most athletes, that tends to be, at least one day off a week.
Yeah, I was reading an article a ex-professional athlete wrote, and I guess during her training time, she was working way too hard and, just overtrained and learned quite a bit from that. So it's really important. Even she was following a guide or, coach's plan, and obviously just overreach. So the rest component's huge. And one of the biggest things she talked about too was strength training. So it doesn't have to be the same for everybody, but definitely keep your body in balance is extremely important through these other, not just swim, bike, run, but strength, stability, flexibility, range of motion exercises.
Yeah, and one of the deadly sins is inconsistency. So one thing we both found that's really helpful is have some type of consistency from week to week. And this is just an example of schedule. For this athlete, the goal is to do 3 swim, 3 bike, 3 run workouts per week, plus a short break on Saturday. And you can kind of see how they spaced out the schedule. So Mondays, typically a day off for a lot of athletes. Friday, and then either Saturday or Sunday are probably the next 2 big choices. But it's important to take advantage of training opportunities as well. So in this case, this athlete can do masters swimming on Tuesdays and Thursdays, so swimming with a group. During the week, if I look at the bike on Friday, I've scheduled a trainer ride. So maybe during the winter, especially the days are short, it may be hard to get out on a bike after work. So riding a trainer or a spinning class might be an acceptable option. But having this consistency from week to week, and what we actually do too is actually block off the time in our schedule so that we can make it a priority and then schedule other things around it. But the key point at the bottom, prioritize. So what's more important that day? If you come from a strong cycling background, maybe the Friday swim is more important for you rather than doing the trainer ride. And then a good goal that we like to stick with is about 75 to 90%. So if you can get in 75 to 90% of the planned workouts in a week, you're doing pretty good. And if you get in 100%, that's great. But it really is surprising how life can get in the way. So we had a great question as part of registration, and so I just added this slide today. So what are some guidelines for the longest workouts that you would expect to do for both a half and a full? So we've kind of broken it out by swim, bike, and run. These are distances we typically see. For a half, your swim is 1.2 miles, which is roughly 1,900 meters. If you've never done a half before, it's probably a good idea to be able to swim that continuously. But generally, for an hour workout, you're probably typically looking for 2,500, 3,000 yards and meters. A full, you probably want to do some longer workouts than an hour just to get used to being in the water for that amount of time. Bike, some guidelines for both. As you notice, except for the swim, in the full, the bike and the run workouts for the full don't have to go up to the full distance. I think 85, or we think 85 to 100 is a good distance to train for. 100 miles, you can take advantage of a planned century ride, and they have 8 stations, so you can practice with 8 stations as well. And then 16 to 18 miles is good for the run. With the half, a little bit more leeway in terms of training up to and a little bit over the distance.
Yeah, this is a great slide because it gives you these guidelines, and again, they're guidelines. So if you're, there's outliers where people tend to do better with maybe a little bit less or even a little bit more than some of these. But for most of us, these are good ranges to build up to. So by building up to, I mean, start out with getting used to doing like that weekly slide we talked about, a balance of swim, bike, run, and integrating your strength training. So that's important to try to get most of that, and then gradually increasing this mileage through different training cycles. And we'll talk about a little bit about interval integration, but just kind of keep in mind these are some good guidelines to build your fitness up to for these distances.
Yeah, and just one comment on the run for the full. If you do want that confidence of having done a full marathon distance before, I'd actually recommend doing that as a separate race. So if you're, winter time's a good time to do that. So it's completely separate from your full Ironman distance training. Otherwise, it can be a lot. Because the thing with these long workouts is they're gonna break you down. So the question is always, quantity versus quality, and I'll give some examples. So the first example, see this a lot, 6-hour ride, maybe I'm trying to get in 100 miles and doing a century, you're probably going to see around 3 stops, so roughly every, hour and a half, 2 hours, to refuel, use the bathroom. And the problem with this ride is, it's probably really hard to stay focused for 6 hours. If you think about going to work and how long can you stay focused working on one thing, and then I'll contrast that with B. So we'll call this the quality workout. So basically, I'm going to shorten the distance. So I'm going to do it for 4-hour ride, but I'm only going to schedule 1 stop. But I'm going to put in some more higher intensity effort. So basically a 2 by 45 minute race pace effort. So for a half Ironman distance, this might be a moderately hard distance. For Ironman, it's not quite as hard, but still a little bit more than just a casual ride. But the goal here is what's the value of both? I mean, there's value in doing both. So 6-hour ride, you get that confidence from being out there that long. But with a 4-hour ride, because it's shorter, you're more likely to stay focused. It's something you could probably do every week, whereas a 6-hour ride you may not want to or be able to. Frankly, I would just get bored. Second example, 3.5-hour long run. We'll call that a slog, so sort of a slow run jog. It's really hard to maintain, a good steady effort for that because it's a long time. Contrast that with, cut the run short, but work in some little bit higher intensity. So some tempo might be a moderately hard effort. So you're still getting, a good training effect without having to put in all that time.
Yeah, the quality is extremely important because if you did attend the last webinar, I did talk about the 3 ways you can improve your fitness, and VO2, lactate threshold, and economy. So when you're doing these harder efforts, you're improving your ability to move quicker. And going into that economy piece a little deeper, there was a question before we started the webinar. We get some questions submitted, and one of them was about how to approach the bike because it's daunting because it's long, for the half and the full. And one of the ways you can really improve your efficiency or quality of riding to make your body more efficient, a more efficient cyclist, is focus on your cadence. So if you're maintaining, a 75 cadence right now and pushing a bigger gear, you're going to fatigue out a lot quicker. You may not be utilizing your hamstrings while your pedal stroke may not be very efficient. So if you want to, improve quality of training, the other thing is doing that for the run, so counting your cadence when you're running. There's a pretty good bit of information on the top runners in the world. When they start to slow down in a race, a lot of times it's because their cadence, their leg turnover is decreasing. So that, how many times per minute your leg hits the ground or makes that revolution on the bike is a really good measure to utilize when you're building your quality.
The other thing to think about training is workouts should progress. So, and by progress, I mean they should evolve as you evolve. So as you become more fit, you can go longer, you can go a little bit faster. So here's just a simple example of a progression. So basically in this set, it's a run workout. I want to increase my running strength and as well as my speed up a hill. So I may start out in week 1 just doing 4 by 40-second efforts uphill, a tempo. So say it's moderately hard to hard, so not all out, but still pretty hard. Jog down, do that 4 times. And how I can progress it, I can progress it in both the number of intervals, so going from 4 to 6 to 8, as well as the time. And what you should see within your workout, if you're following a training plan, you're working with a coach, is there should be some type of progression. It doesn't necessarily mean it goes up every week, but it over time, it should go up as you build up your endurance, you build up your speed.
Yeah, whenever you refer to an interval set or a particular interval workout, it's always good to have an end goal or a progression in mind. So that's how you would develop even your own individualized sessions, or a coach would for you as an athlete, is take that specific interval they want you to work with and progress it. So always think about that progression for your intervals.
Yeah, and just a real quick comment on this. You're going back to the one of the 5 deadly sins of doing too much too soon is you just be careful of jumping into anything. I remember I'll use an extreme example. I did this stair climb fundraiser a number of years ago, and I was stupid for a number of reasons. First, I didn't train for it, so I just went out and said, I'll just do it. I'm a triathlete, I can do anything. And it was basically running up, I think it was like 30 or 40 flights of stairs, for time. So not preparing for it and not warming up. So 2 bad things. And basically, I got to the end, and of course my legs locked up, and I felt like I ripped a hole in my lungs. But sort of the extreme example of trying to do too much too soon. So if I were to step back 4 or 5 weeks and say, okay, let me go out and run some stairs, or go to a stadium, or get on the Stairmaster and build up to that and get my body used to that, rather than risking injury. I love this term, and I've heard it called February star, spring star. But don't let your star shine brightest in the spring. And I always think back in my days in Reston, Virginia, and training with my friends, and we'd go out in February, March, and go on these training rides, and they'd just go out and just hammer it. And I was just like, wow, they're really fast, but it's great to be fast, but it's not so great. You want to be fast on race day, so you don't need to be super fit right now, because it's really hard to hold on to. So it's okay to not be the fastest person in the lane, or the fastest person at your run workout.
Yeah, it's important just to not follow the other person's agenda. So that's a lot of times what we see. There's a quote by Seth Godin, and he says that a lot of times your agenda becomes what someone else's is, and that's not the exact quote, but basically follow your own plan and don't get caught up into someone else's, so you're peaking too early. Think about your goal race. And a lot of questions we had prior to this webinar were on overtraining and what is diminishing returns. So diminishing returns is if you go out and your heart rate's elevated, or you're feeling fatigued, and you're doing a simple maybe aerobic or recovery session, you're just not recovered, and your ability to move at your normal effort level is diminishing. So a good way to prevent this a lot of times is have a measure of recovery, and a simple one is just resting heart rate. So measuring that on a daily basis, making sure it's not too high. So if you see that your resting heart rate is 10 beats higher than normal, then I would probably take the day off. So just depending on how it goes throughout the day as well.
Yeah, so Krista touched briefly on overtraining. So there's a lot of definitions out there, but this one we picked. So the athlete is stressed to the point that unable to recover adequately and performance declines. And kind of go through the symptoms in the next slide, but it's important to realize that even if you're doing the same training week in and week out, other stress from your life, so for example, relationship stress, job stress, just going on vacation can be stressful. So those other types of stresses can impact you. So what might normally be a low stress training week suddenly turns into high stress and can actually push you into overtraining. So what does overtraining look like? So possible symptoms, and it's one of these things that's it's different for each of us, and you may have some or all these. These are some of the more common symptoms, and from me personally, I can say that these all show up for me at some point. Fatigue being the obvious one, performance declines. One of the things you can do, Krista mentioned, resting heart rate, just keeping a training log where you know what you do that day and how you feel. Because a lot of times, I know for me, overtraining shows up as I'm in a bad mood, I'm really irritable, I can't sleep well at night. So it actually shows up more as a mental symptoms before the physical. It can also result in anxiety, depression, as well as injury. And injury, you can do that without overtraining. So important to realize all these things, they're going to hurt you in the long run. So the sooner you can identify that something, hey, you may need to take a day off. Again, go back to the guideline of, if you get 75% of your workouts in a given week, that's still pretty good. So if you have to take a day or two off, especially if you get sick, do it. It's only going to help you in the long run.
Yeah, and one thing I wanted to touch on just briefly is nutrition and hydration, and we'll touch on that in the next. We have another presentation on training nutrition and hydration, but if you aren't very good with planning this out or actually taking things in during a long ride or after repeated workout sessions, that can also cause overtraining because your body's ability to function off of glycogen is diminished, and that can increase your risk of injury, fatigue, and also cause diminished returns. So really, really important to consider carbohydrate intake, fluid, and electrolyte. So if you're really bad at getting those things in while you're training, you want to map out a plan and try to actually follow it, because most of the time when I hear people's plans, they don't follow those plans. So start with something really basic, and then you can always use trial and error to tweak it.
Yeah, and one of the things I found is helpful if you have a significant other or your family, a lot of times they'll see these symptoms before you do. So ask them, say, if you get that feedback is, hey, you seem irritable today, and it's been going on for a couple of days, that's a good sign.
Yeah, or you may just need to eat like me. I get these low glycogen levels when I'm training quite a bit, and it's not just because I've done a workout, but because my metabolic rate is up from doing more training in general. So you do need to consider that as well.
So we've kind of talked a little bit about planning, a little bit about training. Now we kind of sort of want to get into logistics of race week and really focusing on things to pay attention to, especially how these longer races, the halves and fulls, tend to be different than the sprints and Olympics. So again, read the athlete guide. Things to note, timeline, so when do you have to be somewhere and where, logistics, really important for race morning, parking, Ironman Boulder this year, you had to actually park downtown, take a shuttle out to the reservoir, so you couldn't park at the reservoir, so it's important to kind of note those things so you don't try to drive somewhere on race morning and not be able to get to the race. And again, review the rules. Make sure you're familiar with what you can and can't do. So here's an example of a timeline. For a lot of these races, especially the bigger, Ironman branded events, you have to check in, the day before or sometimes even 2 days before. So a lot of the big Ironman races, like a Coeur d'Alene or Arizona, if the race is on Sunday, you probably have to check in no later than Friday. So something to consider if you're traveling from out of town. What events are mandatory, what events are optional. So if we look at Saturday from 10 a.m. to 6 p.m., mandatory bike check-in. An athlete check-in would be mandatory too. So it's important to know, okay, you have to drop off your bike the day before the race between those times. You don't bring it with you on race morning. So you can kind of look through there and see some of the things. And this is going to be different for each race. And, I downloaded like I said, I downloaded the Ironman Boulder guide from last year. And there's actually a lot of great information, a lot of explanations for all this stuff. So definitely, take the time to check that out.
Yeah, when you review that timeline, it's good to integrate your nutrition planning for the day. And again, we'll go over that in the nutrition webinar, but it's a good way to plan out what you're going to bring if you have to get on a shuttle bus or, you have to be up early. For Ironman Boulder, I think my client, she said she had to get up at 3 a.m. just to get her breakfast in and be on the shuttle. So hopefully you won't have to do that in a lot of races, but just consider that for nutritional planning.
Have a gear list. I mean, USAT, if you go online, they have one. When I looked at the Ironman Boulder guide, they actually have their own gear checklist. So you may not need all these things. Like, for example, for Boulder, you wouldn't need a transition mat because you don't have a transition area per se. We'll talk a little bit about that. But just it helps to have a guideline in the day, especially before you leave. If you're traveling, make sure you have everything you need. For the longer races, especially the Ironman branded events, your gear's typically going to go in bags. So instead of having a transition area where you mark it off with a towel by your bike where you lay all your gear down, it's typically going to go in bags. So here's 5 bags. This is what you typically see for an Ironman full distance. So basically, if you think about the progression, so you're going to show up on race morning, dressed in probably sweatpants or your whatever you wear in the morning. And you put on your swim gear, your swim cap, your goggles, your wetsuit if they allow it. Then everything goes in the morning clothes bag. So that's the green bag. You do the swim, you come back, you grab your bike gear bag. So that's where all your bike gear bag is. So when you go into the changing tent, you strip off your swim gear, you put on your bike gear, and then you have the empty bag so you can put in your swim gear. Same thing with the run. You come back on the bike, you grab your run gear bag, take off your bike stuff, put on your run stuff, and then put the bike stuff in the run gear. The 2 other bags, the black and the orange, you're typically only going to see these in Ironman distance, so the full distance events. Basically, it's a bag where you can put stuff in that you might want halfway through the race. It might be extra gel, maybe you want, I used to like gummy bears. I had a friend, and no joke, he used to, like Vienna sausages. So halfway through his Ironman, and that I never understood. But it could be whatever you want that you might need.
Yeah, it's not. Sometimes people put sunscreen, extra electrolytes, things like that. That would help protect your body or fuel you as well.
Yeah, for a lot of the races, if you expect to finish after dark and it cools down, that's where you might put an extra long sleeve shirt or some arm warmers, something you can put on to stay warm. One thing, if you have to be out there early, take the time to drive the bike course and either bike or drive the run course. It just helps to be familiar with it, so you kind of know, okay, this is what this turn looks like. I kind of know that this is what that long gradual uphill feels like or looks like. So then on race day, you kind of have an idea what the course is, and if you read the rules, they actually expect all the athletes to know the course, which may be hard if there's a lot of turns, but at the very least you've seen it before race day.
Yeah, and try to avoid doing a lot of the bike course, the week of your race. One of the biggest mistakes I made before races, age group nationals in Coeur d'Alene, Idaho, I went out with a group of friends and they ended up doing the whole 40K bike course, the Olympic distance, and I was really only supposed to go out for maybe 20 minutes, but I got sucked into this ride because I, didn't turn off and say I'm not going to do that. So big mistake. And another thing is stay off your feet. So if you're going to, it's a good idea to drive the bike course because you really shouldn't be doing too much that week. So, it gives you something to do where you don't have to exert as much energy.
Practice swims, if they have them, they're great. Even me, I'm actually really comfortable in open water, and I feel really good about it. But if I can still get out in the water ahead of time just to practice and look around, and chances are they may have the buoys set up, so you kind of see what things look like from the water and what the buoys look like and what the shore looks like and what you'll see when you're out there, and get a feel for water temperature. I know Vineman, I've done it 6 or 7 times now. It's always, the water's always like right on the boundary. So for me, I sort of have this guideline. If it's high 70s and wetsuit legal, I'll wear a sleeveless wetsuit. If it's low 70s, I'll wear a full sleeve suit, such as these two. And so getting in the water ahead of time and kind of get a feel of, okay, yeah, the full sleeve is going to be too warm, or wow, I really need that full sleeves for the extra warmth. So it helps, helps you with confidence and helps you get comfortable. Preview the transition areas. Entrances, exits, flow. So this is from the Challenge Roth in Germany, and at the time this was the largest Ironman in the world, and with something like 3,000 entrants, individuals, plus another 500 or 600 relays. So huge transition area, and this is only a part of it. There's a whole other area off to the right that you can't even see. So really critical to understand, okay, where's your bike at? You can see in the back left corner, there's I see some porta potties. There's the changing tent. So there'll be typically separate tents for men and women, at least in every race I've done. More porta potties. And each of these little signs on these wooden bike racks are going to have a series of numbers. So this near one on my left might be number 26 to 30. So it looks like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, or 25 to 30. So it looks like groups of 6. So kind of get an idea of where your bike's going to be. So as you come out of the swim, you're going to run by the porta potties, run into the changing tent, out the changing tent, and then you have to find your bike. Typically, for a lot of races, as you're coming back in, as you get to the bike dismount, someone will take your bike, which is really nice, but it may not always be the case. So if someone doesn't take your bike, you have to make sure you know where you're going to put it after the race. Note that most races require the bike drop off the day before the race. Some races, like use Vineman as an example, you actually bring it on race morning. Stay off your feet as much as possible. And the expos can be fun. A lot of cool stuff, and you can test out new products, and they'll talk to you. But I always looked at it as get in, get out. Don't tire your legs out. Pre-race. Make sure you're well rested and fully charged up for race day. So kind of talk through race week up until race morning, kind of run through race day a little bit. This is probably stating the obvious, but give yourself enough time on race morning. There's typically a lot of stuff to do. This is actually a picture from Louisville, the first Ironman Louisville race in 2007. As you can see in the background, it's very dark that morning. So even having a flashlight is helpful. But give yourself enough time. Drop off the race bags. You typically drop them off either the day before or the morning of. I always like to drop them off the morning of, because that way I can double check them at the last minute. Body marking, time for bathroom. There's always, it seems a law that there's always going to be a line, so giving yourself enough time. And then finally, warming up, so loosening up. If you get get in the water a little bit early, it might be that as well.
And I recommend you making a list, especially for your first long course triathlon, of things to do in the morning. I'll never forget my first Ironman, 2006 Ironman Hawaii. I was so excited. I got up, went to the race, got my bike ready, realized I forgot all my water bottles, all my nutrition. So, I figured it out along the way during race day, but that would have been a helpful thing for me, is to write down, grab your water bottles out of the fridge, or at least review the night before what you're going to do in the morning. Time tends to go really fast early in the morning before a race.
Place yourself appropriately for the swim. So this is Coeur d'Alene in 2010. So you can see there's a lot of bodies, and they're all spread out, and you can kind of see the some of the buoys in the background. So a lot of this is relative to how fast you are and how comfortable you are. So if you're a stronger swimmer, you go online, look at the last year's results, and see the times, and kind of if it may not have an exact time of where you are, but if you look at a relative placing, top 10, if you typically finish in the top 10% of the swim, you're probably going to be in the top 10% in a race like this too. So just seat yourself appropriately. These folks starting, they probably actually in the back, they probably started on the shore, so they're just walking in the water. They might lose a minute at most from these people in front. So you're not giving up a lot of time, but if you can feel comfortable, not be crowded, by starting at the back or out the side, then it's probably worth doing. The swim starts are changing. I mean, most of them used to be mass swim starts. Now there's tends to be wave starts, or even some time trial starts, like at a boulder. So basically swimmers getting in a line and just going into the water right after another.
Yeah, one of the things you want to consider with the swim start is your finish time. So if you are starting, let's say a time trial start, and you're seated in the back, it may take about 20-30 minutes for you to get in the water. So when the race starts, it still ends at midnight, but that will affect how much time you have to complete the event. So take that into consideration. Sometimes, like Ironman Chattanooga this year, if you were wearing a wetsuit, then you had to start further in the back of the time trial start. So a client of mine decided, I'm not going to wear a wetsuit, so I can start earlier. I'm okay with not wearing a wetsuit, and that will help me gain some time.
So we talked a little bit about the race bags and changing tents. So they, in this case, the race bags are on the ground. They might be hanging on the racks, on the right side. But again, basically, you're transitioning from one event to the other. So if you're going from swim to bike, you're grabbing your bike bag, running into the tent, putting on your bike, taking off your swim gear, putting on your bike gear, and then throwing your swim gear in the empty bag. Run, you're coming off the bike, grab your run bag, running into the changing tent, taking off your bike gear, putting on your run gear, and then putting your run gear into the bag. Follow your plan. So we started out with having a plan, and your plan is it's part of it is be familiar with the course, and kind of, if you can think of visualizing throughout the day what you want your race to look like, that's sort of your plan. How are you going to seed yourself on the swim? How are you going to feel? When you get to the bike, when are you going to start eating and drinking? What are you going to eat and drink? Same with the run. What's your strategy for going through the aid stations? A great strategy, especially for your first race, is walking the aid station. So running, to an aid station, slowing down enough, you can take the time to recover a little bit and make sure you get in some fluids and fuels, and then running again.
Yeah, and definitely consider the nutrition that you're training with on race day. You might be a little bit sick of it sometimes, and I always say this before someone's first full or half, you're not going to want to take in your gels on the run. You're not going to want to do it. Follow your plan though, because if you do it, and a lot of times when someone does listen to that and stays with their plan, they take that gel on the run when they're supposed to, even though they just don't want to do it. They find that their energy is extended, or they feel like they come back around and, oh my God, that was successful. I'm really glad I followed the plan, even though I didn't want to take it, because I was sort of sick of taking gels at that point. But think about what it does physiologically. Replaces your glycogen stores, replenishes your energy. So those are the kind of things you want to plan and follow.
And one last comment on this. One thing I did that really helped me, especially as I got more experience even, is to write down sort of a play-by-play of the race. So if you think about after the race, a lot of athletes write race reports. You think about it as a pre-race report of sort of how you want it to progress, and how you're going to eat and drink, and how you want to feel, and it actually helps a lot with the pre-race anxiety as well. So we're going to wrap up in a few more slides, and then we'll have some questions. So getting through the race successfully, probably the biggest tip I can offer here, or we can offer here, is break the race into small pieces. Looking back at 28 Ironmans, and I don't think I could ever start one thinking in my head, okay, I've got to get through 2.4 mile swim, 112 mile bike, 26.2 mile run. It's overwhelming. So rather, I break it down as, okay, I need to get to the race site. I need to get body marked. I need to check in my bags, check my tires, get to the swim start. So breaking it into those small little pieces, and once the race starts, okay, I just got to get to that first buoy, get to that second buoy, get to the third buoy, and so on. And what it does is it kind of takes this overwhelming event and kind of breaks it down into small pieces that you can actually do, and that helps a lot mentally. Let the stuff go. So stuff is the stuff that's going to happen. It's your goggles come loose. Someone swims over you. You get a flat tire. Heaven forbid. But just fix it and keep moving on. And moving is really, in order to finish, you have to move forward. So if you're having a really bad time, I've seen a lot of athletes just hanging out in the aid stations, or hanging out in the changing tent. If you need to stop, but to the extent you can, just keep moving, even if it's slow on the bike or slow on the run, because that's what's going to get you to the finish line. And then finally, have fun with it. So this was Blue Devil Triathlon about 10 years ago, and it's a race that doesn't exist anymore, but each of the aid stations had a theme, and this was the Wizard of Oz theme. So that's Dorothy and me running through. And don't forget the sunscreen. Carry a spare tube, tire, bicycle tube, and CO2 cartridges. For a lot of the big races, that they will have SAG vehicles that can fix flats and help you. But if you think about the course is spread out of over 56 or 112 miles, chances are that person being right when you have the flat is pretty low. And I remember one of the years I did Vineman, and one of my friends here, Brandon, he and I were really close. I think he was actually ahead of me on the bike. Well, he ended up flatting, and it took him an hour, for him to get help. And I saw him again on the run, and it was a 3-loop course, 3-loop out and back, and so we ran together. And I was thinking, gosh, if he hadn't had that flat, or he'd been able to change it, he probably would have podiumed that day. Carry some fluids and nutrition. I always like to start with something. That way, if I miss a handoff at an aid station, or I drop something, I've got something as backup. Dress appropriately. Vineman, it's typically cool, 40s, maybe 50s in the morning, so cool when you come out of the water. Start with arm warmers, and then as the day heats up to in the 70s and 80s, as it heats up on the bike, typically about halfway through, just strip off the arm warmers, and then the run, like wearing light-colored jerseys, it tends to help, so you're not absorbing all the heat from the sun either.
So I always suggest that even if you don't need certain, or think you don't need certain types of clothing, bring them. So for example, if the water's really warm leading up to the race, the week, and they say it's not wetsuit legal, bring your wetsuit anyway, because I've done events where the cold front went through the night before the race and the water temperature dropped 10 degrees and all of a sudden it was wetsuit legal. So, that was an advantage for those people that did have their wetsuits. And anything you're going to race in, make sure you've trained in it and trained in the conditions as close as you can to race day. So you can experience using that clothing and how it feels and how your body's going to respond. So that leads us to don't do anything new on race day. And I know that people have done some things successfully, but a lot of times those things they've done on race day they think are new, they've actually trained a little bit with that clothing or that fuel or that equipment. So, again, really be smart and, don't do anything that you don't think will benefit you out there. Don't do it because somebody made you anxious or about it, or, you heard you should.
Yeah, quick story before we wrap up. One of my clients a few years ago was doing Coeur d'Alene, and he was doing the CEO Challenge. So if you're familiar with it, basically, if you're a CEO of a company, you can pay a little bit more and sort of get a more intimate experience of the race, and then you're set up in your own categories, competing against other CEOs. Well, he, as part of the challenge, he got to meet some of the pro athletes and sort of the top vendors, and Zoots was there profiling their new triathlon shoes, sockless shoe, to slip your feet into. Well, they gave him one, and my client, he'd never worn it before, decides to wear it on race day. So it was a hot day, his feet swelled. By the end of the run, his feet were full of blisters and a little bit bloody. So not a good choice. And it ended up, I think that day his run split was actually slower than his bike split. So I can tell you how much he really suffered out there for that last minute change. So now, go achieve your success. And I love this quote from Edmund Hillary. It's not the mountain we conquer, but ourselves. And it's really true. It's really going out there, doing the things you can now, and just making the most out of your race. So thank you for attending tonight. We're going to post the recording. I put the wrong link up there. It's actually going to be at ENDURANCEWORKS.net. /resources, so I'll update that in the presentation and the email I send out. Upcoming webinars, March 10th is how to create a nutrition and hydration plan for triathlon. Krista touched a little bit on that tonight, so this is really critical, especially for the longer distance races. And I've known many athletes who've really fast sprint Olympic distance racers that just fall apart on the longer races because they don't get their nutrition or hydration right. And then March 24th, 2 weeks later, we'll sort of dive into day-to-day nutrition. So what are nutrition habits for a better, healthier body? Not talking about a specific diet or recommendation per se, but rather things you can do daily just to help your overall your body and ultimately your performance. Questions, please contact us. We will stay on the line for a little bit. If you have questions, you can ask them through the chat window. If it's not open, just click on the little triangle next to chat, and it will open up. And we did get some questions online, so we can run through some of those as well.
Okay, so I'm going to go through a couple of these questions, and we'll start with any special keys for older athletes over 65. So two of the most important things I think for older athletes, and this holds true for all of us as well, but increased recovery time. So how do we gauge that? If you're working out post-workout or before your next workout, make sure to check that resting heart rate again, and go by how you feel. Pay attention. Use a scale of 1 to 10, 1 being I feel horrible, 10 being I feel great. See how you feel objectively and subjectively. So strength training is the other thing, and strength training is extremely important. I did have another question about how to strength train for triathlon, what I recommend, and there's a lot of different ways to approach it. If you are not injured, because injury is the most important thing. If you have a sort of a tendonitis, or you are needing to address certain muscles or functionality or mechanics of your movements, those are things you want to definitely start with, and that may mean going to a physical therapist or somebody that can help you address those injuries, which could become chronic or worse. But what I recommend as far as strength training methodology is a functional approach. So by functional, I mean doing exercises that simulate the movements that you're performing. So a squat is a good example, and doing squat variations where you have to sometimes even utilize just a one-leg squat or a one-leg stance where your other leg is tapping or moving, and you're developing your body position in a functional way, so not so much isolation. Using a lot of cues. I have a great video on the 3 main cues to utilize when you're strength training, so you're aware of body position and skeletal alignment. But at the end of the day with strength training, it's important that we develop body symmetry because of the swim, bike, run movements happening in the way they happen in the plane of motion. A lot of times we don't develop things in other plane of motions as well. So the functional movements, stability movements help us do that. So going back to older athletes, that's really important, that strength training component to keep your muscle mass up and bone density. So utilizing some resistance too with your strength. So those were kind of 2 questions. Somebody mentioned rolfers are wonderful, and I think that is a great way to take care of your body, even if you're not injured. So the biggest way you can prevent injury is to be proactive. Rolfing is wonderful because it takes tension out of the soft tissue, the muscles, with active movement. So the goal is to sort of change the patterns of that tension and open up space, so creating space. So rolfing, massage, chiropractic, physical therapy, dry needling. I mean, all these things are great tools, and some may work better than others for each of us, but consider things like that to be also proactive, not just as treatment. And there were definitely a lot of questions about nutrition, and we will address a lot of these specifics in the next presentation. But I will say one of the biggest things that helped me in longer distance training is post-workout recovery formulas. And getting, about 20 grams of protein and a good amount of carbohydrate to help you replace the glycogen, but also the protein for the recovery for the next workout or the next day. So the sooner you can get that in your system, if you bring a packet of Recoverite, or you have a protein shake you can mix up, or you can get a meal in pretty quick within the hour, or even 30 minutes would be better. Bringing an apple, we like those Epic bars. Epic bars are a good source of protein if you eat meat. So anything you can get into your system, that is key with recovery. So So we will talk about training nutrition more in the next presentation. Oh, there's a question up there. David?
The question is, do all athletes go into changing tents between disciplines? It really depends on the race. I think for a lot of the bigger races, you're going to have changing tents. Just the nature of the race is a lot of folks, they may wear a swimsuit, transition to bike clothing, and then, into run clothing. And part of it is they want to avoid nudity. Vineman is sort of an exception. You actually, they have a full and a half. For the full, at least, you do have your little transition area set up at your bike. So there's separate transition areas, but there is a changing tent available. So in that case, you don't have to go to the changing tent. So if I were wearing, if I'm racing, I would wear, tri shorts and a sleeveless tri top. So I would actually just wear that from start to finish, so I wouldn't need the changing tent. But for some of the races, they'll actually route you through the changing tent. If you don't need to change, then you could just run through. And a lot of times they'll put porta potties in there, and they'll have sunscreen available as well, and usually water too. It actually can be kind of nice because they'll have folding chairs set up, and they'll have volunteers that'll help you with stuff. So you go in there, dump all your crap out, and put on your stuff. And a lot of times, they're not required to, and if they're available, a lot of times they'll help you put stuff back in your bags and help you move through or grab you water. So the volunteers are great. So it's a good question. Do we have an opinion on using your familiar road bike with tri-bars versus investing in a tri-bike?
I think you can do really well with a road bike with aero bars as long as you get a good bike fit. And when you do have a road bike and you put aero bars on it, and you're getting fit, consider being down in the aero bars when you're getting your fit. So you sort of have to get fit for the position you're going to be in the most. And if that means a flat course or mostly in the aero bars, which are pretty efficient if you can sustain that on the course, you want to look at your fit geared towards that a little more. And a tri-bike is great if you're comfortable in it, if it's the right bike. I've been through a series of bikes over the years and figured out I don't like these thick frames and that create a lot of resistance, or the frame size, the basis of support affects how I feel when I descend. So I need a longer bike but appropriate top tube for my torso length. So when you do have a tri-bike, you're in your aero bars and you don't have the same stability, but you get used to that, of course, if you train in the bars. So making sure the bike is fit for aero position is extremely important if you're going to be in that aero position. But you can generate a lot of power in aero position if you're set up properly. So that's why we do have triathlon bikes and aero bars.
Yeah, and I'd say one thing this brings up is really, really important is comfort. And I'll give an example. I started with a road bike with aero bars, and I used that for the first couple of years, and then I got my first tri-bike, and I bought it, and I didn't know much, so I just took, they told me I needed a 56 centimeter bike, so that's what I got. In hindsight, I should have had I got a 58 centimeter bike. In hindsight, I should have had a 54. So the bike was too big for me, and it was really aero, and I was really aggressive, but it was really uncomfortable. So I ended up with a lot of neck pain, and I couldn't stay, in the aero bars that long. So in that case, it probably would have been better to ride the road bike and be comfortable, because when you're out there for 2-3 hours and a half, or maybe a little bit longer, and 5, 6, 7 hours on a full, you really want to be comfortable on your bike. Whatever clothing you're wearing, it's so critical, because there's nothing worse than being miserable knowing that you still have to bike another 56 miles. We had another question is, what happens if you go over the 17 hours? A lot of races, basically they'll let you finish, but they'll basically won't be official. So again, this is going to depend on the race, and what may happen is you may not have an announcer at the finish line. You may lose some of the volunteer support. So in that case, if you do think you might be over a little bit longer and you want to finish, make sure you have some type of glow stick or reflective clothing if you're going to be out there in the dark.
Yeah, and they do have cutoff times for swim, bike, and run, and swim and bike in a lot of the races, just to make sure that people are safe and they have enough support on the course for everybody. So I don't remember the exacts for Ironman, but you could check the athlete guides for that for the race. But again, like David said, it's different for every event. They might let you keep going in some cases.
You got a question? Are we going to Tri-Mania in DC? Unfortunately, not this year. So when last year, Krista mentioned I started the Luray Triathlon in Virginia, but I actually passed that on at the end of last year. So there will be a new race director for that, and he will be there to promote the event.
Yeah, that's a fun event. I wish we could be there, but it is really great, and for those of you that will attend, a lot of great vendors and a lot of fun and a lot of good information, clinics and talks and keynote speakers. So wish we could be there. It's a great time.
Any other questions? Feel free to email us too, and like I said, I'll send out an email with the details, and I'll send out the correct link for the recording as well.
Yeah, and if you do have, there were some questions about how much to train for each sport, and we go back to, like, David likes the 3 times a week for each sport, trying to balance that and gradually build to those distances we recommended. And training with time or distance, either works. We utilize both. I think time over distance is easier for general population for training plans, but you can always integrate both time and distance when you're working on your training plans, and be adaptable. Like we said, it's important to have a plan, but be able to adapt when you need to, move things around, recover, and really take into account your individual needs. I think that's the biggest thing I've learned as an athlete over the years, and I try to relay that to as many people as I can. We're big on planning, but also big on adaptability.
So again, I'll send out information on how to access the recording. I should have it up probably tomorrow, but I'll give myself until Thursday just in case. And you can find everything at ENDURANCEWORKS.net. Schooloftri.com is a separate website we had, but decided a few weeks ago to consolidate everything on ENDURANCEWORKS, so I didn't have to maintain 2 different websites. But all the content that was on School of Tri is in the classrooms at ENDURANCEWORKS.net. Great. Well, thank you very much, and appreciate everyone who attended and registered, and the questions, and good luck with your season this year. And I always like to use the analogy of it's triathlon, and sort of this puzzle, and as you do longer races, the puzzle gets more pieces, and you can try to fit together all the pieces just right, and sometimes it works out, and sometimes it doesn't. But it's sort of the fun of it, and the challenge of it is and just listening on this, hopefully you got some valuable tips. But just go out, have fun with it, and remember, if you don't have a great race, you can always do another one.
Yeah, thanks a lot for your time, everyone, and do your best. I mean, that's really all you can do, and that's all anybody can expect out of you. So get out there and do what you can, and stay, like we said, be smart.
Yep. And have fun. Take care.